My wife smirked. "Once we prove you're an absent husband, I'll take everything." While texting my best friend about their business venture, I said, "Do it if you can," collecting bank statements and location logs, until one hotel receipt showed how long they'd been preparing. So I finally figured out what was really happening in my marriage, and honestly, it took discovering a level of betrayal I never thought was possible to see how blind I'd been. I'm 31, work as a night security guard at a big office complex downtown. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well, and I recently got promoted to supervisor, which came with a decent raise and better benefits. I work the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, which means I'm home during the day when most people are at work. My wife, Indy, is 30, claims she works part-time doing marketing for small businesses. The setup has always worked for us. I sleep during the morning, we have the afternoon together, and she's usually home by the time I leave for work. We've been married for 6 years, and until recently, I thought we were solid. But over the past 8 months, things have been deteriorating in ways I couldn't understand. Indy became distant, started rejecting physical intimacy, always seemed annoyed when I tried to talk about our day or make plans together. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd say she was stressed about work or that I was being needy. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under trying to build my business," she'd say. "I need space to focus." I tried to be supportive, took over more household responsibilities, gave her the space she said she needed, figured this was just a rough patch that couples go through. But the distance kept growing. Then I started noticing our joint savings account was decreasing faster than it should have been. We'd had about $35,000 saved up from my steady income over the years, but the balance kept dropping. When I asked Indy about it, she said it was just inflation, higher bills, the cost of her marketing work. "I have to invest in professional development," she'd explain. "Marketing courses, networking events, software subscriptions. It costs money to make money." That made sense in theory, but $200 or $300 disappearing from our account every few days seemed excessive for professional development. 2 weeks ago, I was using our shared tablet to look up something for work when Snapchat notifications started popping up. I don't use Snapchat, and I thought Indy had deleted it months ago. But there were messages from someone named K with preview text that made my stomach drop. "Security boy at work again? Can't wait for tonight. Been thinking about our business plan all day." He has no idea what we're building together. I sat there staring at these messages, trying to process what I was seeing. My wife was exchanging flirty messages with someone who was mocking my job and talking about building something together while I was at work. I scrolled up through the conversation and found months of messages between Indy and someone I realized was Knox, my best friend since college. Messages about meeting up while Wade's at work, jokes about my schedule, and constant references to our future and the plan. Knox has been my closest friend for over 10 years. He was my best man at our wedding. He's been to our house for dinner countless times. He knows everything about my life, my work schedule, my marriage problems. And apparently, he's been using all that information to have an affair with my wife. When I confronted Indy about the messages that night, she broke down and admitted to what she called an emotional affair, said it had started as Knox giving her business advice, that he was helping her understand marketing and entrepreneurship in ways I couldn't. "It's not what you think," she insisted through tears. "Knox believes in my potential. He sees what I could become. You just see me as your wife who stays home all day." She claimed nothing physical had happened, that they were just close friends and business partners. Said I was too negative about her ambitions and that Knox understood her dreams in ways I didn't. But then she admitted something that made my blood run cold. She'd been taking money from our joint account to invest in their business venture. "How much money?" I asked. "About $15,000 over the past 6 months. But it's an investment, Wade. Knox is teaching me about business development, market analysis, client acquisition. This money is going to come back to us multiplied." I stared at my wife, realizing she'd been stealing from our savings to fund whatever relationship she had with my best friend, all while making me feel like I was the problem in our marriage. "Show me the business plan," I said. "Show me the marketing courses, the client contracts, the evidence of this investment." She couldn't, because there wasn't any. Update 1. So I demanded transparency about the money, And what I discovered is that the business investment was just the cover story for something much worse. When I insisted on seeing receipts for Indy's business expenses, she provided me with documentation that looked legitimate at first glance. Invoices for marketing courses, business equipment purchases, networking event fees. Knox backed up her story, telling me he was mentoring her through the early stages of entrepreneurship and that I should be supportive of her ambitions. She's got real potential, man, Knox told me over beers Thursday night, looking me straight in the eye. You should be proud that she's taking initiative to build something of her own. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that my wife was building a business and my best friend was helping her succeed. But something felt off about the whole situation. That's when my coworker Colt mentioned something that made my stomach drop. Hey, weird question, Colt said during our shift Friday night. But I saw Indy's car at the Marriott downtown yesterday afternoon. Hope everything's okay. I know you guys have been going through a rough patch. The Marriott is 15 minutes from our house, in the opposite direction from any of the businesses Indy claims to work with. What time was this? I asked. Maybe 2 p.m.? Her car was definitely there when I drove by for my dentist appointment. I called my sister Sage, who's an accountant, and asked her to review our bank statements with fresh eyes. What she found made me realize how much I'd been missing. Wade, there are transfers here totaling $28,000 to someone named Knox Harlan, she told me over the phone. The transfers started 8 months ago, always in amounts under $1,000 to avoid triggering automatic alerts. This isn't random business expenses. This is systematic. $28,000. Almost our entire savings account, transferred to my best friend over 8 months. The transaction notes say things like business consulting and marketing education, Sage continued. But these amounts are way too large and too frequent for legitimate business expenses. That weekend, I made a decision I'm not proud of, but I needed to know the truth. I installed a tracking app on our shared tablet, the same device where I'd found the Snapchat messages. If Indy was really just taking business meetings and Knox was really just mentoring her, the tracking would show legitimate business locations. What the tracking revealed over the next week destroyed any remaining doubt I had about what was happening. Indy and Knox were meeting at hotels 2 to 3 times a week during my work shifts. Always expensive places, the Marriott, the Hilton, boutique hotels downtown. They were also going to high-end restaurants, shopping centers, entertainment venues. All during the day, all while I was sleeping or at work, all funded by money taken from our joint account. The business meetings were elaborate dates, paid for with stolen money. But what really broke me was realizing how long this had been planned. The tracking showed they'd been meeting regularly for 8 months. Exactly when our marriage problems started. Exactly when the money transfers began. Exactly when Indy started rejecting intimacy and claiming she needed space. Our marriage hadn't deteriorated because of stress or communication problems. It had deteriorated because my wife was living a double life with my best friend, using my income to fund their relationship, while making me feel like I was failing as a husband. I confronted Knox directly Tuesday night. Showed up at his house and laid out everything I'd discovered. The tracking data, the bank transfers, the hotel receipts. I know everything, I told him. He tried to deny it at first, but when faced with the evidence, he broke down and admitted to what he called a mistake that got out of hand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said. Indy was she was unhappy, man. She felt like you didn't appreciate her. I was trying to help her figure out her career stuff, and things just developed. With $28,000 of my money. That money was for legitimate business development, he insisted. I've been teaching her about marketing, helping her build a client base. The hotels were just convenient meeting places. I looked at this person I'd trusted with everything, my friendship, my family, my financial security, and realized he was still lying to my face even when caught. But I also realized there was probably more to this story that I hadn't uncovered yet. Update 2. So I dug deeper into Knox's situation, and what I found explains why my money was so important to their scheme, and why this has been much more calculated than just an affair that got out of hand. Tuesday evening, Knox's wife Tara approached me at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd been debating whether to say something. Wade, can we talk privately? She asked. There's some stuff about Knox I think you should know. We sat in her car in the parking lot, and what she told me made everything click into place. "Knox has been lying to me about his business for months," she said. "He told me his restaurant was doing well, but I found collection notices hidden in his office. He owes suppliers, the landlord, the bank. It's at least $75,000 in debt." Knox's restaurant venture, which he'd been bragging about for 2 years, was completely failing. Not just struggling, actively hemorrhaging money and facing closure. "The collection calls started 6 months ago," Tara continued. "He keeps telling me he's working on payment plans, but the amounts keep growing. I think he's been using credit cards to pay other credit cards." That timeline matched exactly with when the transfers from my account to Knox had started. "Has he mentioned getting money from anywhere else?" I asked. "He said he had some private investors interested in the restaurant, that he was meeting with them regularly to discuss capital injection." I assumed that meant legitimate business meetings. Private investors. Meeting regularly. Capital injection. My wife wasn't Knox's affair partner. She was his accomplice in a scheme to save his failing business with my money. But Tara had more to tell me. "I've been suspicious about his schedule," she said. "He claims to be at the restaurant during the day, but when I call there, he's never available. The staff always says he's in meetings or with investors." I told Tara about the tracking data, the hotel meetings, the bank transfers. Her face went white. "He's been stealing from your family to fund his business debts while having an affair with your wife?" "I think so. But I think there's more to it than that." That night, my neighbor Dex confirmed my worst suspicions. He approached me while I was getting my mail. "Hey Wade, this might be nothing, but I've been meaning to ask. Has your friend Knox been staying over? I've seen his truck in your driveway overnight a bunch of times when you're at work." "Overnight? Yeah, maybe once or twice a week for the past few months. Always when your car's gone, which I figured meant you were at work." Knox hadn't just been meeting Indy at hotels. He'd been spending nights in my house, in my bed, while I was at work earning the money that was funding his lifestyle and his business debts. Thursday, I hired a financial investigator, something I never thought I'd need to do, but the scope of what was happening required professional help. What he found was devastating. Knox and Indy had created an entire fake business infrastructure to justify the money transfers. Fake invoices, fake business registration, fake receipts for services that never existed. They'd built a paper trail that would make the stolen money look like legitimate business investment if anyone investigated. But more than that, they'd been researching divorce laws. The investigator found internet searches on Knox's devices for things like emotional abandonment grounds for divorce, proving spouse prioritized work over marriage, and dividing marital assets when one spouse neglects family. They weren't just stealing my money and having an affair. They were building a legal case to claim that I had abandoned my marriage emotionally, that my work schedule proved I didn't prioritize my family, and that Indy deserved compensation for being neglected throughout our marriage. The plan was diabolical in its completeness. Steal my money to fund Knox's business and their relationship, create false evidence of my supposed emotional absence, then file for divorce claiming I had driven Indy to seek comfort elsewhere through my neglect. Knox would get clean money to pay his business debts. Indy would get alimony and a favorable settlement, and I would be left with nothing while being painted as the villain who destroyed his own marriage. What made me physically sick was realizing how long they'd been planning this. 8 months of systematic theft, carefully documented evidence of my work schedule, fake business records, legal research about divorce strategy. They had turned my dedication to providing for our family into evidence that I was a neglectful husband who deserved to lose everything. Final update. So I ended their scheme in the most satisfying way possible, and the consequences for both of them have been swift and devastating. Before I made any moves, I wanted to understand the full scope of their plan. I spent another week gathering evidence, documenting everything, and preparing for what I knew would be a nuclear confrontation. The financial investigator provided me with a complete picture of their fraud. They'd stolen $28,000 from my account, created fake business documentation to cover their tracks, and been researching legal strategies to paint me as an emotionally absent husband in divorce proceedings. But the most damaging piece of evidence was Knox's restaurant debt situation. Collection agencies were threatening legal action, and he needed at least $50,000 immediately to avoid bankruptcy and closure. My money had bought him time, but it wasn't enough to solve his fundamental business problems. Saturday night, I told Indy I was going to work early for a special security assignment. Instead, I parked down the street and waited. Around 11 p.m., Knox's truck pulled into my driveway. I gave them 30 minutes, then let myself back into my house quietly with my lawyer following behind me. We found them in my kitchen, Knox counting cash while Indy sorted through financial documents spread across the table. Bank statements, business receipts, legal research printouts about divorce law. They were literally planning my financial destruction in my own home. "Working late on the business plan?" I asked as I walked in. Both of them froze. Knox had about $3,000 in cash on the table, money from our joint account that he'd withdrawn that afternoon. My lawyer introduced himself and laid out copies of everything we'd discovered. The tracking data showing hotel meetings, bank records of unauthorized transfers, fake business documentation, Knox's actual debt situation, internet search history about divorce strategy. "Here's what's going to happen," my lawyer told them. "Indy is going to transfer back every remaining penny from the joint account that hasn't been spent on your fraud. Knox is going to sign documents acknowledging the money was obtained through deception, not legitimate business investment. And both of you are going to cooperate with an uncontested divorce where Wade keeps everything he brought into the marriage." Knox immediately tried to distance himself from the scheme. "This was never about hurting Wade," he said. "I genuinely believed in Indy's business potential." "By stealing his money and sleeping with his wife?" my lawyer asked. Indy broke down completely and tried to claim it was all Knox's idea, that he'd manipulated her into the affair by promising to help her career. But the evidence showed months of planning from both of them. The practical consequences came quickly. Indy returned the remaining $12,000 that hadn't been spent on hotels and restaurants. Knox faced fraud charges when Tara decided to press charges for forging documents using her identity to support their fake business claims. But the personal consequences were more satisfying than any legal victory. Knox's restaurant closed within a month. Without my money to service his debts, he couldn't avoid bankruptcy. His marriage ended when Tara realized the full extent of his deception. His social circle evaporated when word spread about what he'd done to his best friend. Indy lost everything in the divorce. Because the money theft was documented fraud, she had no claim to any marital assets and actually had to pay my legal fees. Her marketing business was exposed as completely fictional, and her reputation in our community was destroyed when people learned about the elaborate scheme. Most satisfying of all, their relationship fell apart the moment the money was gone, and they faced consequences. Knox blamed Indy for being too demanding about expensive dates and hotels. Indy blamed Knox for promising her a future he couldn't deliver. When the financial incentives disappeared, they had nothing left holding them together. For me, the aftermath has been surprisingly positive. Getting promoted to security supervisor right as my personal life was falling apart helped me focus on building something stable and legitimate. The betrayal was devastating, but it also freed me from a marriage built on lies and a friendship that was never real. 6 months later, I've rebuilt my savings, moved into a better apartment, and started dating someone who works day shifts and shares my values about honesty and financial responsibility. Someone who chooses me for who I am rather than what I can provide for their schemes. What I learned through this whole experience is that when someone shows you who they really are, when their actions consistently contradict their words, you should believe their actions. Indy and Knox showed me for 8 months that they were willing to steal from me, lie to me, and destroy my life for their benefit. I just wasn't ready to see it until the evidence was undeniable. The hardest lesson wasn't about their betrayal. It was about recognizing when my loyalty and trust were being weaponized against me. I'd spent months trying to save a marriage that was already over, trying to support a wife who was actively plotting to rob me, trying to maintain a friendship with someone who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Now I focus on relationships with people who contribute rather than just take, who build trust rather than exploit it, who choose honesty even when lies would be easier. The night shift isn't glamorous, but it pays well and it's honest work. More honest than anything Knox or Indy were doing while I was supporting them both. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering who people really are before they can complete their plans to destroy your life.